Hello and welcome to the coffee break, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for myself here in Helsinki. Maybe this morning if you're tuning in from Brazil, where Claire is actually based today. You've joined the coffee break. The coffee break are micro CPD sessions for ELT. Faster than, I guess, a coffee and piece of cake is the idea. So we're going to get straight into things. And this week, we're actually joined by our guest, Claire Venables. Claire's tuning in from Brazil in Sao Paulo today. And we will get there quickly. Before we do, a little bit about how today will go. Our guest will present a topic for 15 minutes, and I'm glad you guys have decided to come along to learn more about planning play-based lessons. Then our guest, everyone out there has the final 15 minutes to ask questions. And to ask questions, we'll be using slido.com today. And to do so, here we are. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Great. So Slido is an app where you can pose questions to the speaker, and you can also vote for each other's questions. So at the end of our session today, after 15 minutes, the most popular questions will be answered. As you can see on screen there, I'd actually suggest using your mobile. That way you can be here in the Zoom session, but you can be asking questions via your mobile. It makes it a lot easier. Our code for today, well, firstly, head over to slido.com, and our code is number 59465. Again, if you have any questions for Claire during the first 15 minutes of the session, this is the place to put them. You can vote on everyone else's questions. And that means, with at the moment around 50 people in the room and growing, we can answer the most burning questions that you have. Okay, and moving on. Our guest today, as I said, is Claire Venables. She's a qualified English teacher who has been, dedicated to the ELT scene since around 2001. We met in Barcelona many, many years ago. After a decade in Spain, she moved to Brazil in 2011, where she's worked on the creation and implementation of English programs in schools. Also to note, she is a materials writer and board member of 2 special interest groups, or SIGs, one of those being Voices for Women and Voices for Women and Young Learners and Teens. She's the founder and director of Active English, and most importantly, she likes her coffee locally grown and freshly brewed. And as Claire is joining us from Brazil today, I think she's got a wide selection to choose from. Claire, how are you? And more importantly, what are you drinking today?
Hello, Miles. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I am drinking from my Brelt mug. That's my favorite ELT Facebook group. And the coffee that I'm drinking was a gift to me from a friend of mine whose family own a tiny little coffee, they have a coffee, what do you call it? They grow coffee. They grow and roast their own coffee in the south of Minas Gerais. So this coffee is locally grown. It is delicious and freshly brewed. I hope you all have coffee. Does everyone else have a coffee with them? Yes. Yes. Cheers. Water there, very healthy. It is fantastic to be with you all. Now, Miles, I have 15 minutes, don't I?
Hey, that's right, Claire. I'm going to throw it to you now. You do have 15 minutes. And the burning question for today is, how can I plan play-based lessons?
That's right. And just before I jump in and share my screen, I'd like to say nowadays I'm working exclusively with teacher training and materials writing after almost 2 decades in the classroom. But anyone who knows me will probably tell you that I'm also all about connecting with other ELT professionals. And that's why it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Miles, for this lovely invitation. And thank you all. I'm so delighted that so many people have shown up to hear about something that I am very passionate about and something that I think is more important than ever. And that's play-based learning, of course. And I started talking about this a little while ago over on my Instagram account. And I was amazed at just how much of a buzz this topic created. And I was interested to see something else as well. There are many different ideas about what play-based learning is and how it should look in a language classroom. So in today's coffee break, what I'd like to do is present to you what it looks like for me. And I can't think of a better way of doing that than providing you all with a practical example of how we can take a traditional teacher-led activity and use that as language support for students to play freely. And I'm going to get you to do one with me, Miles, by the way. I hope you have a pen there with you, because I would like to kickstart this by modeling a game for you all. And I want to show you, of course, some of the results from my classroom. And this is the reason why I really believe this works, not just in theory, but in practice. And I want to present you with a definition of play and play-based learning in the early childhood and primary years context. I'm a big advocate for free play in language lessons, and I'm excited to be discussing that with you in the Q&A after. So if you're all ready, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to share these slides with you. So how can I plan play-based lessons? 15 minutes. Wow, here we go. Let's get this started. This teacher-led game, Miles, I'm going to ask you to please turn on your mic so we can model it. This is just for fun, people. I can't think of a better way of explaining this concept to you in such a short time than getting Miles to play. In my class, teacher-led play happens at circle time. We'll be looking at exactly what teacher-led play is in a minute. And all of the activities and games that I introduce for my primary and pre-primary learners are very carefully selected. I make sure that I'm following a very defined format with a clear structure, roles, and that the participants and I follow a script of language that is planned beforehand, and I use it consistently every time we play this game. And this is what provides the input and the structure, the scaffolding for the free play. And this particular game is introduced with a video that I will link you up to so you can check out, which is actually a story. So the story becomes a jump off point for playing this game. And the game is called It's Not a Box, and it's directly connected to the video. It's called It's Not a Box. And what I will do is I'll start this by modeling the roles, the structure and the script with the children, like I'm going to do with Miles. And then normally what we would do is we would repeat this as we go around, letting each child have a turn. Now, like I said, we're working on the language of play as well as the target language. And this provides an opportunity, as you'll see, for like a lot of emergent vocabulary to appear during the game. And what we need to focus on here is making sure that it's almost like a drill, this game. It's a cleverly disguised drill. And this is the moment where I can give immediate feedback and correction on their language production. So Miles, you ready?
Hey, I'm ready.
This game is called It's Not a Box. Okay, and we start off with a pen. I have a pen. Normally this would be passed around the circle, but in times of social distancing and in remote teaching and learning, everybody needs to have their own pen. Maybe you have a pen there. Maybe everybody has a pen. I can see some pens. Great. Maybe you'd like to play along as well. So the script for this goes like this. I'm going to ask Miles and the group, I'm going to say, what's this? And Miles will respond, it's a
pen.
No, it's not a pen. And Miles, you're going to say, well, what is it?
Well, what is it?
It's a moustache. And you have to say, ah.
Oh, I can see that. It's a moustache.
And you say, ah.
Ah.
And everybody at home says, ah. Miles, it's your turn. And so now I'll support Miles to follow the same script. Miles, you asked, what's
this?
And I say, it's a pen.
It's not a pen.
Well, what is it?
In fact, it's a moustache.
Miles, you have to come up with something else now. So it's your turn to come up with something. You are creative enough, Miles. You can do this.
It's a magic wand.
Ah! A magic wand, fantastic. And then everybody at home would go, a magic wand. And we would go around and around the group, letting each person have a turn, repeating this script. And here's a little tip from me to you. It's really interesting the way even the shyest learner in my groups was able to, by the end of this game, by strategically letting them go last, they have heard and seen this language. They know exactly what to do. They've heard and seen it so many times that by the time it's their turn to come up with something, they feel quite confident with this activity. I love this. And I'll tell you, I have used it with students of all different ages and levels. I've even used it with adults. It has come from one of these activities that they actually often use in teams of creatives to brainstorm before they have to come up with a final concept. So I hope that you can give this a go. All of the instructions in this game, in fact, the full lesson plan is going to be sent out to you. So if you're taking notes, don't worry too much if you still haven't got it. I'm going to be sharing this in an email that's coming out. So this game uses what Brunner refers to as a format. Now, a format has three important elements, and I've mentioned these already. I'm going to highlight them now. It has roles, structure, and a script. And you can probably work out what those are, the roles, the structure, and the script of this game. But that's what a format has. And that's what you'll need to look for when you're choosing a teacher-led game to tie in with free play. Now, I feel this is the most common type of play that we see in the language classroom, and I'm sure you'd probably agree. A lot of games. But as you're going to see by the end of this session, this is not enough to be considered play-based learning. This is a game, and while I love games in my lesson, there is very little space for agency, autonomy, creativity. Well, there's a bit of creativity there, wasn't there? But typically in games, there's not a lot of space for students to really act and make decisions about what it is that they want to do and say. So I think that this quote is marvelous, absolutely marvelous. It talks about the importance of children's agency, especially in learning. So those words there, initiative, decision-making, self-choice in play, are usually very limited in the typical games that we see in ELT course books and the typical games that we're using in our classrooms, many of us anyway. Ultimately, I believe that play in our classrooms should involve some degree of agency and really enable children to take an active role and an ownership in their experiences. And I think we also need to recognize that children are capable, autonomous, and they can be agents of their own playful learning journeys. I love that quote. I first heard it with Sandy Mordaunt, that she says, play is a child's work. Sandy Mordaunt was actually one of my favorite professionals in our field. Has anyone read anything by Dr. Sandy Mordaunt? You should definitely take a look at her research into early learning areas in EFL contexts. I'm going to link you up, of course, in my references. I've got a list of references and further reading for you all. But she suggests that the most effective lessons strike a balance between two specific types of play, because there are lots of types of play, right? But she talks about this idea of finding a balance between teacher-led play and child-initiated play. Now, teacher-led play, like I've just modeled, is where we model the language and behavior, supporting interactions. There are routines. It's when we as teachers initiate games. These are all a great part of any language lesson. But she suggests about bringing in this child-initiated play, free moments for them to discover, experiment, create. Now, I'm 100% positive that there is not a young learner teacher here that doesn't use teacher-led play in their classes. I do wonder, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my conversations with the teachers in my community, I wonder how many of us are actually taking the next step and making space in their lessons for child-initiated play. How many of us are ready to do what Sandy refers to as the handover? I love this. The handover, and listen to this, the handover refers to the moment when the teacher puts the language into the hands of the learners and allows them time and freedom to experiment with that language as they wish. It's the moment when children can use the words and phrases that they know in new and creative and often surprising ways. When provided with the right amount of support and input through teacher-led play, children, and you will see this happening, children can transfer their knowledge to new contexts and use it in ways that are meaningful to them. Let's get back to my lesson that I promised I'd walk you through. So this is the video that I use at the start of a lesson like that. This becomes the jump off point, this story. It's an animated story. I'm going to send you the link. And this really sets the stage for the game that I showed you before. And it's about a little rabbit who has a box, and this box gets transformed into all different kinds of amazing things, like a burning building that you can see there. Isn't that what kids do when they get empty boxes? Don't they love doing that? Using their imagination to create all kinds of things. Well, this little story is all about this rabbit who does exactly that. And it's short. The language in the story is supported by the animation perfectly. So it's able, you can use this with learners of all different levels of proficiency easily. But like I said, after I've done that, the story actually becomes the script for the game that I play. So they've seen the story, they've been introduced to this concept, along comes a teacher-led game to provide the script, and then it's time for a bit of free play. And how do I do this? Well, let me tell you a story. A normal teacher walking along the street will see a normal person walking along the street will see empty boxes that have been abandoned and not think much of it. But a young learner teacher, as you know, will look at those empty boxes and not be able to resist picking them up. So I had this big empty box collection in my house. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew eventually I'd be using them with my students. And when I saw this story and I thought of this game, I realized this is the moment. So I had actually brought in all of these empty boxes, and they'd been left in the corner of a room, and the kids had come in, not seen the boxes at all. Maybe they'd seen them, but they didn't pick, it wasn't on their radar. They hadn't really thought anything of it. And then we watched this video, and then we played this game. And can you imagine what happened next? Suddenly everyone looked over to the corner where all those empty boxes were, and it was like this massive aha moment. And of course, then it was free play time. So where do you think all of the kids naturally and spontaneously headed? Over to that corner where all the boxes were, and they were off, playing with the boxes you can see here in this yellow circle, putting them on their heads, stacking them up, knocking them over. I got in amongst it. Oh, what's this? It's not a box. What is it? They were turning them into all kinds of things. And in another section of our classroom, I had previously set up lots of art and craft materials. And a lot of them then made their way over naturally and spontaneously to this art table that you can see here, and started creating things with their boxes. And this is where a lot of that language that we'd practiced in the teacher-led game actually started emerging in a very natural way as I interacted with them as they decorated their boxes and made things like robots. Look at this lovely robot costume. Can you all see that there? This little boy, actually, he loved this box so much that he wore it to school the next day. And I know this because that's actually my son. And when he put it on and I said, you can't wear that to school. You can't wear a box to school, Aloy. He said to me, Mummy, it's not a box. So I really couldn't argue with him there. So that is something that I think is really easy, a really easy example of how you can connect storytelling or songs or any kind of activity with a teacher-led game. And then the thing that I want to urge people to do is just create space in your lesson for them to do something with that language on their own. What I love about these kinds of activities is that they do stimulate a child's creativity. They develop critical thinking and problem solving. They are developmentally inclusive because they allow children to work within their own zone of proximal development. And they provide an opportunity, as you saw, for language to emerge. So football stadium, refrigerator, racing car, robot, these were all the kinds of words, the things that they wanted to create with their boxes that wasn't on a pre-scripted list of vocabulary from the course book. It was things that they really genuinely wanted to do and talk about. And that was an opportunity for me to provide them with the language in L2 to do that, to do so. So that's what I love about these activities. Play-based learning, they say that, and I like this definition, rather than something that we do, they say that it's a context that we create, you know, and I think that's something to keep in mind when we are looking to make the step towards this sort of more holistic, playful learning approach. I've got another quote for you. I'm the quote queen today, but I think this is really important. Play and guided play offers strong support for academic and social learning. And the reason why I think it's important to bring in quotes like this is because we are now seeing so much more empirical research into the benefits of play. I don't know why this isn't more present in our classrooms, especially our language classrooms. So the document that I took this from, the Encyclopedia of Early Childhood Development, it presents research findings that are also in favor of this balance between free play and guided play that is scaffolded by the teacher. Remember that scaffolding and support in a language classroom means lots of opportunities for the children to see, hear, and use that language before being expected to produce it themselves. It's something I hear a lot from the teachers when they're talking about like letting their children just play. They wouldn't be producing any English. And if they have enough language input and support to do that, they will. And I've seen it happen all the time in my classes. I'm not talking that suddenly they're going to be speaking fluently in English, but what I have noticed, what I have observed is things like English words popping up in a string of L1, the target vocabulary. I've seen children take the script from a story that we've read a million times and use it in play as they role play with different objects that they've taken from the shelves. I've seen children take vocabulary from the vocabulary work that we've been doing and other materials and mix them together to create a new and original game. I've seen children in the playground outside of English class playing games that we've played before in our classroom spontaneously and because they want to. This for me is gold. So with your teacher-led play, we're talking about things like stories, songs, chants, the repetitive use of classroom language as part of your routine, a game that you play with them. These are all things that you're probably doing anyway with your students. Let me tell you this to finish. Miles, how am I doing for time?
Oh, I think we can squeeze in one more minute. Go ahead.
Let me finish with this. When I moved away from rote learning to play-based learning in my language lessons, it was very instinctive at the time. I knew there was something wrong with the way I was doing things. It was a constant struggle to get kids to behave and pay attention, and to get them to do so, I felt like I had to do backflips to keep them interested and motivated. I'm always hearing teachers at events everywhere, you'll always see things about how to motivate your young learners, how to engage your learners. At the end of the day, I felt like I was just teaching lists of words as well. And I wanted to move beyond teaching just the language and move towards an approach that was responsive to the developmental needs of the child, their abilities, their interests, help them build on their knowledge of not just the language, but of themselves, of the community that they belong to, of the world that they're living in. And all this needed to be done in a way that engaged them, involved them, and developed their autonomy as lifelong learners. Now, listening to that, it does actually seem like an incredibly unrealistic challenge, especially if you, like me, had like 45 minutes twice a week. But it actually ended up being so much simpler than I thought. The answer was play. The answer was just let them play. And most of us are probably familiar with that idea that children learn through play. But I really think that we need to take that step beyond the teacher-led play and just open up space in your lesson plan for playful opportunities for students to learn. That is the way they learn best. I'm gonna end it there. I have so much more to say about this topic, but I hope that in the short time that I have had to share with you today, that you might be inspired to give this a go in your classroom. If you are still interested in checking out, doing a little bit of further reading, here are my references and suggestions for really great things for you to read if you're interested in exploring this more, the theory of this. You can always join me over on Instagram as well. I'm gonna send these to you all so you don't have to worry about copying anything down. If you are interested in getting this email from me with the slides and all of these links and stuff, that's a QR code that you can grab there while I hand it back over to Miles. Thank you all very much for listening. I'm looking forward now to discussing this with some more people.
Thanks so much, Claire. What we'll do is we'll jump straight into the questions, as there are many coming through. So once again, thank you for using slido.com throughout the talk to bring the questions. The most popular question, actually, won't be a moment. Here we go, we've got them coming through. So our most popular question at the moment, with 5 votes, Claire, is: are there any recorded videos we can watch of free play, of free play lessons? Is there anything we can find online? Oh, sorry, Claire, I think you might be on mute at the moment, if you just unmute your mic.
Isn't that a classic?
Like all of our students.
Yes, the most commonly heard sentence of 2020, you're on mute. So are there any recorded videos? It's actually really hard to find recorded videos. I have got a lot of material on my Instagram account that you can check out, not necessarily of free play, however. It's a good question. I don't have access to any material. I think it is difficult to find videos like that because of how difficult it is to get permission. Not necessarily how difficult it is, but it is a lot to do with permission to record and use recordings of children. I'm not sure of any links with free play lessons, fully recorded. It's a great idea though. Maybe I should look into doing that.
No, thanks, Claire. Let's roll through that. Next question with 3 votes is there somewhere I can go to in order to find more game-like ideas, like It's Not a Box?
Yes, there probably is. I'm going to suggest that you Google drama warmers. I think a lot of drama games are really good for this. But I'm going to repeat those characteristics that I talked to you about that Bruna mentions: roles, structure, and script. These ideas of finding games that have this repetition and this language that repeats, and these stages and things. A lot of children's playground games. What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? Musical chairs. Even games like Memory have all of these elements that you can use. But check out drama warmers, because I think that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from.
Great, next question. I'd love to do, I would love to do it somehow online. How can I do it?
Wow, this is such a great question. And this is what my community and I have been discussing a lot. How can we make this work in the remote teaching context? And the lesson plan that I'm going to send you is with the game that I just taught you. It is the lesson that I've just explained to you that has been adapted for the online context. And full disclosure, I haven't taught this lesson online myself, but the good news is my community has. So a lot of people have downloaded this lesson plan, tried it, and sent me wonderful pictures, which is on my Instagram account as well. Wonderful pictures of the results that they got through doing the Not a Box lesson. So this would be a good place for you to start, and then jump off and roll with it and see what else you can come up with, and then share it back with me if you do.
Thanks, Claire. Next one, with 1 vote coming through. Do all games need to be linked to the topic context students are learning?
So here's the thing about that. Most of my games, no, I'm going to say all of my games are, but this is what ends up happening. I have like cycles. So cycles will be working on a theme or topic for about a month. And a lot of the materials that we use in different ways in a teacher-led moment of the lesson end up in the free play section, available for the children to use freely. So I don't necessarily tell them what they're going to do, but the materials are there, and something interesting happens. The materials that they've seen and used with me often get linked somehow to the language that they were used with. And it doesn't always happen. I'm not going to say that my children are suddenly speaking fluently in English, not at all. There is a lot of L1 use. But then you will find, and if you observe carefully, you will see that students are using spontaneously, freely, and creatively chunks of language or vocabulary. And that's still, even if there's lots of L1 in there, that spontaneous, deliberate use of language for their own communicative purposes is still a million times better for me than them being able to recite a list of words, then be able to count from 1 to 10, or, you know, someone says, what's this? It's yellow. What's this? It's a cushion. You know, that kind of language use for me is what it's all about. And so I would say, yes, it's linked to the topic and content, but it is put there and left for them to do what they want to do with it. It's not me dictating what it is they need to say or how they need to play with it. So you do need to take a step back.
Okay, we're under 5 minutes remaining now with a few questions here. So just a reminder, you can actually vote for these questions. The more votes they get, they will bump up on screen into the top 3 and your question will be answered. So thank you for that one, Claire. We're moving on. I was wondering if there's any online websites for games.
Online websites for games, not specifically free play games, but I would suggest a couple of websites that I can suggest is WordWall, Bamboozle, Kahoot. For free play, we've been loving, not for free play, but for free a type of play, we've been loving using Jamboard in my community. A lot of teachers have done wonderful activities using interactive whiteboards as well. Oh, great, an idea. I just remembered something. So some teachers have been doing free play activities where they've been letting the children draw on the whiteboard, an interactive whiteboard. And some of the games that have this is actually flipping this idea. A teacher of mine used this interactive whiteboard and was having this sort of doodle moment on the board. And then one of the students took the doodle of the other student and turned it into a picture. And so she ran with that and she ended up turning that into a teacher-led game from the free play. So she would do a squiggle and then they would have to turn that into something, and it had a little script that they followed for that. It was really nice. So I hope that's another idea that you might consider incorporating into your repertoire.
Moving on, thanks, Claire. A question about assessment. How do you deal with assessment in the play-based classroom?
The assessment in a play-based classroom doesn't look very different to assessment in a regular classroom. And let me tell you why. One of the things that I think puts off a lot of teachers from using play-based learning is they feel that during the free play, it's free time for the teacher. And they sort of feel like they need to be doing things all the time. It's not free play, it's not free time for the teacher at all. It is a moment, and this is something that you have to get really good at. It is a moment that is perfect for assessment. If you want to know if your learning outcomes are really being met, sit there and observe your students during free play time. Observe what they can do with the language, what they can't do with the language. Observe where they're going to still need more language support or input. This is a moment for you to be documenting this. If you are doing any kind of formative assessment, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to gather pedagogical documentation, evidence of learning through video recordings, audio recordings, photographs. You can put all of these into a digital portfolio if you're working online. This is something that we're working with at 3 of the bilingual schools that I'm a consultant for. There's lots of things, wonderful ways to assess students through play-based learning, and I highly encourage you all to check that out.
I think we've got time for one more, so let's squeeze it in if we can. Last question for the day. How do you deal with institutional constraints regarding play-based learning?
Yeah, listen, this is it, isn't it? This is it, where our beliefs and our own, how we would like to be as teachers, conflicts with the school community or the institution within which we are working. And I saw further down there a little question about Asian culture and the difficulty of implementing sort of play-based learning in cultures where play is not seen as serious work. It is a conflict, and sometimes in some contexts, I don't feel that there will be space for you to implement this. I can only speak to my experience where I was lucky enough to be in a school context where I was given a lot of freedom to be the kind of teacher I wanted to be. But I earned it, and I earned it by what I actually did. And this was a little bit of trick that I can pass on to you. I developed really good relationships with the parents. So that meant running workshops from the start of the year. I didn't have a teacher parent meeting at the start of the year. I had a workshop that I did, and it was a bit like clickbait, really. I said 5 ways to support your child's journey to becoming bilingual. And so I got all of these parents showing up, and in that I took the opportunity to bust a lot of myths about language learning in childhood. And I got everyone on the same page about what my approach was and what we were going to do, and set really realistic objectives for that year. And then it's a matter of showing up, being in the playground when they're dropping off the parents, talking to the parents, telling them little anecdotes about what their child's doing in class, inviting them to come into your classroom and participate in Open Doors Day. The best way to convince parents that this works is to show them that it's working. And creating a strong relationship, a strong homeschool link, I think is essential to, because this just does require a lot of change. It requires a lot of change within the teacher about what we believe language learning needs to look like, but it also requires the whole school community to jump on board with this. It's not easy, but I can tell you, when I made that transition, has become, without a doubt, the most fulfilling work I've ever done. So that's my answer to that.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on there. So thank you very much for giving up a bit of your time today. I think we did well to squeeze it into 30 minutes, the time it takes for coffee and piece of cake. Thanks so much for everyone too coming along. We will be back again in a couple of weeks' time. However, this time it's actually going to be on a Friday, which is a little bit different for us because we have been rolling on Thursdays at this time. So if I just go through, sorry. Our next session will actually be with Patrice Palmer. And this will be looking at the topic of teacher self-care, which I think is quite relevant at the moment. So what you'll see here coming up is our burning question for the day will be, why should I care about teacher self-care? Patrice will come on and she will be outlining some simple self-care strategies that stick within 15 minutes and again, taking questions. So I do hope to see you come along there. From me, you'll get an email immediately after this session with all the information needed. I'll be working with Claire to make sure we can get some examples out, as we mentioned during the session as well to you. And apart from that, thanks a lot for coming along for our fast, quick coffee break today. That's a goodbye from me, and Claire might like to wish you goodwill as well.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Goodbye, and I hope you have a great day.